running back position at Ohio State is certainly one of the legendary spots in college football, the destination of great all-time players. Who will be the next guy? We got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. We would ask that if you enjoy the discussion, the debate, the analysis here, to like, comment, share the videos out on social media, and please subscribe. All right, Pat, of course, again, the running back position at Ohio State is legendary. They had more of a committee working until Trey Sermon really kicked it in down the stretch last year. But people are enamored, and I can understand with the two freshmen coming in, Evan Pryor and Treyeveon Henderson. And, of course, it was Master Teague's deal last year, and it appears as though he at least technically still has that starting job.
Yeah, it seems so. When we talked to running backs coach Tony Alford just earlier this week, he said, if there was a game tomorrow that Master Teague would be the starter. He's the incumbent guy. He's got the most experience of this group of 6 scholarship running backs. And it'll be very interesting to see, as spring plays out, if we can get a sense of the pecking order, and obviously going into fall, what they do with 6 guys that all I think have a legitimate something to say about this running back job. But you mentioned the 2 freshmen. Treyeveon Henderson was, by the 247 Sports composite rankings, the #1 running back in the country. And, so obviously there's a lot to be excited about there. Evan Pryor, not far behind. He's a top 100 player, was a 4-star prospect. What I think is really interesting about these 2 kids, and we kind of learned, we talked to them for the first time this week and learned a bit more about them. They committed to Ohio State 11 days apart. And the running back position is not like quarterback where, only one plays in a lot of offenses. And obviously we've seen that in Ohio State. So that's not that uncommon. But from what, Tony Alford said and what these 2 running backs said was they got really close during the recruitment process. And interestingly enough, they weren't allowed to, visit each other or visit Ohio State because of COVID restrictions and things like that. So a lot of that was done online or through texting and whatnot, but they became very good friends. And Evan Pryor committed first and really helped in Treyeveon Henderson committing to the Buckeyes, which I think is a little bit unique to get 2 guys that highly regarded in one class and have them be, so tightly wound in each other's recruitment. And Tony Alford even said that, another program, which he didn't want to name, tried to kind of pit them against each other during the recruitment process. And, they're going to do this with this guy. They're going to do this with this guy. And, as he put it, if they'd just done their homework, they would have known that these 2 running backs wanted to be, playing on the same team. So that tactic did not work. But what Ohio State certainly got in these 2 are 2 very talented running backs. Different styles. The funny thing that came out of interviews the other day was Treyeveon Henderson said he couldn't wait till Ohio State put pads on, which they've already done on what they did on Wednesday for the first time. He wanted to take a hit. Neither guy played high school football last year because of COVID situations. So he said he needed a hit to wake him up and that he'd be fine. And Evan Pryor said, he didn't want to take a hit. He's the type that likes to get out in open space and, he wants to go to the end zone with no contact. So, you just kind of get a sense of these 2 different style of runners that I think complement each other really well. And then we learned that they compete in everything. Not only are they competing as freshman running backs at Ohio State looking for playing time next fall, but their roommates, if one guy cooks something, the other guy tries to cook it and see which one's better, things like that. So, you've got 2 really competitive kids, 2 kids that get along really well, and absolutely 2 really talented kids. And it'll be very interesting to see, how they progress over the next several months and how much they can contribute next fall. And like I said at the beginning of this, I really think this is open. Master Teague certainly has a leg up because of how much he's played. And there's obviously the 3 other guys in Marcus Crowley, Steele Chambers, and Mayan Williams who have all had various levels of success in small sample size. But I think that there's a real opportunity here. Master Teague, as you and I have talked about before on here, has been good, not great, especially in big time situations. Though I think maybe, he dispelled a little bit of that against Alabama in the national championship game, 2 touchdowns. I don't think he expected to play as much as he did with the way Trey Sermon was playing before he got hurt. So maybe as he gets really 100% from that Achilles injury suffered last spring, maybe you see a bit more from him. But like I said, I think this is an open competition, and I think that these 2 freshman running back have as good of a chance as anyone.
Ohio State has a history of, regardless of the coach, of having one like main guy that is just outstanding, whether that's J.K., Hyde, Elliott, going back through history. Rarely if they had two guys. There's usually a second guy, of course, but he's just receives a lot less of the carries. And I think the closest we've seen is J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber for a couple seasons where they overlapped and they were both getting a decent amount of the carries. But we'll see with a couple of top 5 backs in the country coming in Pryor and Henderson. And as you mentioned to me before we started to record, the fascination with Mayan Williams with 10 career carries.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. He certainly had a nice run in the Clemson game, but he's gotten a lot of hype. And when we talked to him, he said he's noticed his increase in social media following after that Clemson game. Just talk about him in general. He's hearing some of the buzz more so than he was coming into Ohio State when he wasn't a highly recruited player. So, it'll be very interesting. His name was brought up by Tony Alford as a guy that he thinks, could do something this year. So, that hype isn't just coming from fans. I'm of the belief that I need to see more than 10 carries before I start hyping up a guy. But when you hear Tony Alford, unprompted, bring up a young player who hasn't seen a lot of playing time, I think that speaks well for the player's future and what they're seeing in practice.
Get your free Buckeye mask. It's at voiceofcollegefootball.com. You can register for free right there, right at the top of the menu bar. Register for free. You get a coupon code for a free Buckeye mask or whatever college football team you want. We've got about 35 available and 20% off your first purchase and a $25 gift card entry as well. We got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts talking up the Buckeyes this week. And Pat and the rest of the media able to talk to running backs and linebackers this week. When we look at that linebacking core, much ridicule and criticism, although the play, I think, has been noticeably better the last few years, but a ton of productivity is gone. How does that size up at this point with, unfortunately, Dallas Gant missing the rest of spring training, we know?
It's essentially a whole new group in terms of guys that have really contributed for Ohio State. The names that Buckeye fans knew, whether they felt that they should be out there or not, and Tuff Borland, Pete Werner, Baron Browning, and really last year Justin Hilliard was almost that fourth starter. All gone. All graduated, all off. Hopefully to have NFL careers. So you've got to replace 3 spots there. And you mentioned Dallas Gant. He's a guy who played a good amount last year in terms of a backup role at middle linebacker. He, as you said, is going to be out for the spring, has a foot injury. Didn't really go into detail about it, just said, he's out for the spring and he'll be back in the summer. He doesn't think it's going to set him back too much, but it's going to be a lot of mental reps, a lot of mentoring younger guys, kind of being an extra coach on the sideline this spring for him, which for a guy who hasn't played a ton, probably not the best situation, but he is a senior, so he has gotten, a good amount of experience, throughout his career. And then he's got 2 classmates in Treyeveon Mitchell and Kayvon Pope, who I think a lot of people expect to kind of step into those roles. These are guys that we've talked about for a couple of years now, is when are they going to step into a bigger role? And it was always hard because those guys I mentioned earlier were always there, and they just never seem to leave. Tuff Borland has been playing football for the Buckeyes, it seemed, for the last 7-8 years. And beyond them, there's going to be some other guys involved in the competition. Craig Young, Cody Simon, Tommy Eichenberg was a guy who was talked about when we talked to the linebackers a few times. Mitchell Melton, redshirt freshman. So, there's a number of guys that can, potentially step in. And it's also important to remember that Ohio State kind of uses that, or has discussed at least, using that hybrid safety linebacker position at the Sam linebacker. Now, the last 2 years, They've stuck with a linebacker there. Pete Werner played that role 2 years ago, and Baron Browning last year. But this might be a year where you see more of a safety type. It just depends on kind of who fits best with what they want to do. Court Williams is a guy who came in as a freshman last year, injured I believe it was his knee before the season even started, but he was a guy specifically recruited to play that kind of hybrid role. Lathan Ransom, we saw late in the season last year. He's a safety, but played a lot down towards the line of scrimmage, in the box type of stuff. He could do that. So, while there are 3 technical linebacker positions, if Ohio State decides that they're better off with having one of the more hybrid type players that they've got on the roster on the field, maybe you're now only talking about the Mike and the Will as 2 spots up for grabs when you're talking about pure linebackers. But I imagine that the older guys will fill out those spots, at least at the Mike and the Will. Dallas Gant and Treyeveon Mitchell seem to be the most likely, but it's going to play out. I have to keep reminding myself as I talk about these guys and write about them, there are only a few practices in the spring. So there's not a lot of answers yet. They just put pads on Wednesday, like I said. So, there's a lot to still be filled out in these positions where there's a lot of uncertainty. Hopefully as we progress further in the spring, we'll get some more answers and, ideally get to see some of this and at the very least get to see, some of these guys play in the spring game in mid-April.
Get your free Buckeye mask. Go to voiceofcollegefootball.com. Register for free up at the top of the screen where it says register for free. And you get your coupon code for your free mask right there. 20% off your free first purchase as well. These quarterbacks, it's going to be highly anticipated as a spring game when fans can finally see and media, everybody see these guys throw the football for the first time. It's a 3-way competition, of course, and we only have a couple touchdown runs to show for the 3 of them in terms of production. No passes thrown in collegiate play. Based on what Ryan Day's address at his news conference and some of the conversations you've had, is there anything to distinguish these guys at this point? And maybe even if it isn't from who's in the lead, just to distinguish their qualities and characteristics as throwers and runners?
Yeah, I think that there's not a ton. I think that these guys, from the players we've talked to, they're all saying similar things. Big arms, looking good, working hard, good leaders. And I think that is what you're going to hear a lot of because that's what Ryan Day recruited towards. I think they're all good athletes as well. I think CJ Stroud is probably the most regarded as a runner. I talked to Jack Miller's coach, his high school coach recently, and he said, look, he wasn't labeled as a dual threat quarterback, but he was honest. He's not a guy who picks up a lot of yards with his legs, but he said he's a guy who can, move, get you out of trouble and still deliver the ball downfield, which is what we saw a lot of Justin Fields do. Justin Fields didn't rush for a ton of yards in his 2 years starting at Ohio State, but he did move around quite a bit. CJ Stroud definitely can do that. If you watch any of his high school film, and from what I've seen of Kyle McCord, I think similar things with him too. Kyle McCord probably has the best arm of the 3, but obviously the least experience. He wasn't in, he was in high school last year. So, I think if I am giving them kind of a ranking right now, just based on, little things I've heard here and there, I would say CJ Stroud is probably 1A, with Jack Miller at 1B. And I think that's probably very close. I don't think there was a ton that separated them from what they were able to do last year. And then just based on the fact that, he just got in the building a couple months ago, Kyle McCord is behind those 3. But from everything we've heard, and, again, it's early on, these guys aren't going to take a lot of hits. So you're not going to see a lot of live action with them, even if you're in the building. But, I think everything we've heard is very positive about them. And I would expect nothing less. These were all highly recruited guys that, were all handpicked by Ryan Day and his staff, frankly, even going back to when Jack Miller committed, when Ryan Day was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. So, I would suspect that this competition carries out through spring. Ryan Day was pretty frank and said that, if there's a guy that pulls ahead and, we're able to comfortably see that and, say that publicly, then we will. I just don't see that happening at this point. I think, these guys need to continue to get reps, continue to develop. And, I think it's probably somewhere in fall camp where you start to really see one guy, his name be talked about more than the others. Because right now they're just all grouped together every time we talk to somebody about them.
The best friend of a quarterback, a young quarterback, would be the running game. And by extension, Thayer Munford would be a very good asset for this young quarterback trio. He's been in the program forever. He's very highly productive, been an excellent player during his time, has decided to come back, and you had a chance to talk to Thayer this week.
Yeah, a really great kid. And, it's awesome that he decided to come back. He talked to us about the fact that, as much as he thinks there's still more he can develop as a football player, he made a promise to his mom that he would graduate college and be the first in his family to do so. And, he'll do that in August. Or at least he's on track to do that in August. And, I think that's a unique situation. A lot of times you see guys that first opportunity to jump to the NFL when they're highly regarded, they take it. Thayer Munford didn't do that after his junior year, decided to take advantage of the NCAA rule this past year that it didn't count against players' eligibility. And, he's back for a fifth year. And, so that's advantage Ohio State, because now you've got one of the best left tackles in the country. I think PFF rated him as the number one returning tackle in terms of pressures allowed and their metrics and whatnot. So, that's good news, as you said, for a young quarterback who need his blind side protected. And on top of that, you get a guy who has really emerged, I'd say, over the last year or so as a leader for this team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I interviewed Thayer when he was a senior in high school, and just to see the difference in confidence when just, talking and demeanor and things like that, it's really noticeable. So, when we talked to him the other day, you could just tell he's excited to be back. He's excited for this opportunity, not only to play, but like I said, to graduate from college. And, now he's going to hope to kind of end it on a good note. They've gotten close the last couple of years in terms of a national championship. And, having him back certainly keeps them in line to compete for that again.
You mentioned the term noticeable, and I think that was uttered by Ryan Day in describing Zach Harrison's improvement.
Yeah.
And here's a guy that I would never come anywhere close to calling him a bust in any way, because he's been highly productive. He's a good player, but so much is expected of this guy, maybe unfairly, but that was a reputation coming in the recruiting ranking that you wouldn't be able to expect a player of his caliber, a physical specimen of his caliber, to improve that much. But Ryan Days, I know that he said this week that he is that much more mature of a player, both physically and mentally.
At Ohio State, if you come in, especially these last 5-6 years, you come in as a highly ranked defensive end, the comparisons are easy, right? You start with Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Chase Young. You work your way down that list, and obviously there's been many guys before them, but that was the comparison thrown about Zach Harrison for a long time, especially because he grew up just outside of Columbus. Was a kid who grew up, as they say, in the shadow of Ohio Stadium. So for a long time, he's been talked about as that guy. Didn't commit to Ohio State until very late in the process, but it was kind of always expected that he would. Had a good freshman season. Actually, if you look at his numbers compared to Chase Young's numbers as a freshman, very, very similar. And then last year, I don't know if it was the off season or lack of a normal off season or what it was, but the production just wasn't there, especially early on. Not a high number of snaps, and he got better as the year went on. But like all of the defensive ends, the statistics weren't great, and Zach was very admitting of this when we talked to him a week or so ago about he thinks that he needs to be better, and so he kind of had a light bulb went on moment where he said, I'm going to dedicate myself to this program and do all the things I need to do this year, this offseason, to be the best player I can be come the fall. And this came after Ryan Day had praised him for, as you said, kind of finally looking like the player that they expected. At least in winter workouts, these past couple months. So, if he can become that defensive end that can really terrorize, opposing offenses the way that the guys I mentioned before can, that'll certainly help Ohio State's defense. We've talked plenty about the pass defense and the struggles. A way to help a pass defense, aside from, cornerbacks and safeties and everything and coverages, is get to the quarterback, don't let him throw the ball. So, if they have a guy like that who can rise to the occasion, then that helps the entire defense.
5.5 sacks and 10 tackles for loss for Zach Harrison over 2 seasons, 2019 and 2020. Pat Murphy joining us to break down the Buckeyes. You can join him on Bucknuts 247 Sports. Pat, we always appreciate you stopping by and breaking things down for us.
Absolutely. Anytime.